Hi, I'm Deanna Joe, and welcome to my channel, Responsible Faith. Today, I have a guest, Jennifer Brewer, and she has written a book called Free, From Legalism to Grace, Breaking Out of the United Pentecostal Church. And we're just going to chat about her book, and you can see the little tabs out the side. I've been through it a few times. So, welcome, Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi.
Very excited.
So yes, how long has this book been out?
It has been out since last August. So like August 2019 is when that came
Okay.
out.
How did you get into the UPC? Born in, joined, what was your beginnings?
Okay, so my father left my mom when I was around 7, and my mom was just searching for something. She was into some things that she didn't want to raise me in, like drugs, alcohol kind of thing. She had tried other religions and it really didn't stick with her. She couldn't be faithful to the churches or to her religious beliefs until she met someone that she worked with who actually became my stepdad. He taught her a Bible study about the UPC and their beliefs, and she started going to UPC church around the time I was 8 years old.
Okay, so 8.
Yeah.
So you kind of joined, but kind of not.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my option.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't understand. I was more upset because the church that we had been attending, not faithfully, but we were going with our neighbors and all my friends were there. So I was upset, I guess, that we went. But then my mom explained it as, well, this church teaches the whole Bible, where the other church only teaches part. So, of course, as a kid at that point, you just want to do what your parent wants and what God would want you to do. So,
Yeah. So you mentioned in your book about doing Bible quizzing.
yes, that was a huge part of my childhood. That was all of our vacations, like every trip out, every time we ate out to eat, it was Bible quizzing related. My parents were very, very much involved in our district. Um, I did that from the time I was 9 until the time I was 16.
Oh, wow.
My stepbrother, he did it from the time he was 6 until he was 18. So it was a huge part of our life.
So you have a lot of scripture memorized.
I do, because when you Bible quiz, you memorize between 200 to 600 verses a year, depending on what level of quizzing that you're in.
Yeah.
So I think I tried to add it up one time and it's like thousands and thousands. I don't even know, like 3,000 or 4,000 verses that I've memorized in my lifetime. People today still you still remember some of them. So they
Yeah.
like to make fun of me about that. Like, oh, do you just want to quote this verse instead of reading it, in our small group or whatever?
And you
Yeah.
say, well, I could.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing.
So, I mean, that was one good takeaway from the UPC.
That is a good takeaway. I have a lot of good family memories from that. It's a bittersweet memory because it was forced on me. Unfortunately, like I passed that part on to my kids, and when they were young, I forced them to do it. So really, Bible quizzing was a part of my life for 25 years in some way or another. Which the Bible part is good.
Yes.
The indoctrination of the United Pentecostal Church's theology, not so good.
Yeah. And I just wanted to speak to a portion in your book where you write about how that as a child you had nightmares and that you had a fear of hell and a fear of the rapture and a fear of missing the rapture and being left behind. And because a common problem in fundamentalist groups that are very legalistic in their leaning is you have no assurance of salvation.
Right.
Even the adults, a lot of them don't have an assurance of salvation. There's this kind of this doubt and hesitation in the back of their mind. And so when you're a kid and you grow up in this, I found there was a lack of discernment about what was appropriate for children and what wasn't. There just seemed to be no filter at all. And as a
Right.
kid, you absorbed it. So kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Everything that you just said is so spot on. Um, I think that it started, I don't even know how old I was. I had to have been around the age of 10 or younger. there was this huge drama at our church about the rapture. And the storyline was this teenager, wanted to go do parties and, buy these dirty magazines and everything that could send you straight to hell, like first shot, right? And every time that they sinned, the devil was nailing a nail in their coffin. And so finally, when, this teenager at the end of the drama gets in a car accident and dies, and the rapture happens, and the devil is standing over their coffin because all these nails are now in it and they can't be risen with the church. And this was so, as far as dramas, it was beautifully for our church, it was put on beautifully. But I just remember watching that in horror because I'm like, oh my gosh, all of these little things that this person did, they lied, they looked at something lustfully, like any little sin that you can think of. And that was just reason to not to go to heaven. And I was so young to be introduced to that at that age level. And so that produced a lot of questions, a lot of doubts, a lot of insecurities. Anytime my mom was late to pick me up from school or wherever, I automatically assumed the rapture happened. And I was a nervous wreck by the time she got there. I was a basket case. This was before cell phones, so here I am sitting at my middle school, waiting for her, whatever, and just freaking out. I would have nightmares about the rapture taking place. And for some reason, I couldn't rise with the saints. I'd be like stuck in the building, like halfway up, but I had done something so small and insurmountable that I didn't even know about. And so I'd wake up just in a cold sweat thinking, what could I have possibly done that I sinned, and here I am, a child, what was I doing? Just, oh my gosh, it was that I can't even explain the amount of anxiety that I had every second of every day. I couldn't mess up any little thing. And I just was immediately repentant and just upset at myself.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. I think that's common. I can remember having nightmares and, being worried. I remember like my mom was a stay-at-home mom and she was always there. And I remember as a kid coming home from school one day and mom wasn't there. And I was scared. I was terrified that, and I could just remember standing in the kitchen thinking, oh my goodness, the rapture's happened and I didn't make it and mom's gone. What do I do?
And how old were you?
I was probably I was in elementary school for sure. I'm thinking maybe grade 4,
right?
3 or 4.
Too young for that.
Yeah, way too young for that. And I can remember within, 3 or 4, probably maybe 5 or 6 minutes, mom comes rushing through the door and she's like, oh my goodness, I hope you weren't scared or anything. She was next door visiting my grandmother and she had left to come home. The bus had been a few minutes early and it was just one of those things, but I was terrified and I've told her about it since. And she's like, well, why didn't you tell me? But I don't know. Why don't you tell those things when you're a kid?
I don't know. I didn't tell mine either.
As a kid, you don't have the ability to process this stuff. And so, yeah, I kind of just wanted to touch on that because I do think that it is something that people raising their kids in church and in Christianity need to consider. What is age appropriate? Are our teachings traumatizing our kids? Are they robbing them of peace? Are they instilling anxiety in them? So you mentioned in your book as well your time as a teenager in school, and you said that you sort of felt like an outcast, but there was also this part of you that felt special and a little sense of pride that brought judgment. Do you want to just talk about that? What was middle school and high school like? As awkward as it was for the rest of us, I'm sure, but with the UPC component there, it's a whole other level of awkward.
Oh, right. A whole other level. And I think until you've lived that, you have no idea. Middle school was the worst for me. I think it's just because everybody's awkward in middle school anyway. And it was just, I don't know, a terrible time as far as that goes. But yeah, you feel awkward because you're constantly, at least I was constantly being asked if I was Amish for one. That was the number one question I was always asked. And my comeback was my parents own a car. No, I'm not Amish. Yeah. But I mean, I guess when you're in middle school and you see somebody wearing long skirts all the time, because I don't know why, I don't know if it was like a preference on my end or my mom just bought me those skirts. I don't know, but I always had skirts to my ankles. Like that was just what I wore. But I that already kind of put me on high alarm of these people already look at me like I'm crazy, you know. But at the same time, I was very arrogant, I guess would be a good word, and in my own mind. Because I looked around and I was the only Pentecostal, like UPC girl in my school. So I was the only one that was going to go to heaven. And I would think about that because, of course, you know, the rapture is one of the things that you think about a lot. And I would just sit in my classes, I remember, and go, yeah, the rapture happened. I would be the only one in this entire school. And how prideful is that? I had any idea what those kids were doing at home? You know, I have no idea. And even I have a good friend that still to this day, she's one of my best friends, and I met her in 8th grade, and her family was amazing. They are amazing. They're Christians. They are good, solid people in their faith. They raise their children in their faith. And I look at them and I feel guilty because I actually thought they were going to go to hell. You know, like I already had it in my mind. Anytime they would say anything to me like, oh, we had church, you know, or I prayed for you, or, you know, whatever they said, I automatically like did an eye roll in my head, like, okay, that's so sweet, you know, bless your heart. But you can't actually verbalize those things either, because I was already like so self-aware of how much people were looking at me and making fun of me and teasing me. So it's so hard to say you're arrogant and prideful, but a misfit at the same time. But it's definitely.
So you were teased.
Oh my gosh, yes, I was teased. My whole high school, middle school, high school years just kind of stayed invisible the best I could.
Which is hard when you look different than everybody else.
Right. That's lovely.
Yeah.
And you can't do anything to better yourself because it's not like you can fix your hair any different or experiment with makeup, you know.
Very limited.
Yeah.
Unless you're a female, you don't get it.
Right. Yeah. My husband does come back to me and say, well, I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. I'm like, okay.
Good for you. Ooh, no shorts. I mean,
right.
Guys just don't wear shorts anyway.
Well, that's what I said. I'm like, so you wore pants, you know, was it like you were wearing a kilt or something?
Yeah,
you know?
no, it's one of those things that, yeah, you have to live it to understand what it does to your self-esteem.
Exactly.
You said that it led you to judge others, and I think that's common. When you've got a lot of rules, you've got a visual measuring stick, and so, of course, you measure everyone by it.
Yeah.
And even if it goes against your personality, like, you don't strike me as a judgmental person.
Well, that's good. I've covered it well.
I'm sitting here judging you right now.
No, it's a learned behavior though, because when you are around that, I had to like do a reset on my whole personality when we left, because I remember, this is terrible of me. This is gonna give away how judgmental I am. But I would stand on the stage. Well, we called it the platform at our church. You know, you can't call it a stage. Anyway,
it is what it was.
Right. Whole other episode there too. I don't mean to make fun. I'm really not making fun. But I would stand up there with the pastor's wife and completely judge what other people were wearing, what they would walk in, you know, with their hair, how their hair was fixed. If someone were to walk in with their hair cut for the first time, oh, you got clobbered behind your back. The way someone would sing, the way, like, they're so mean. And I had to take a step back from that, and I feel so guilty. Like, I had to repent a lot, and I actually had to call people and be like, listen, I'm sorry, because I was so judgmental. I really was. But, you know, when you are removed from that environment for a while, and I started studying, you know, the traits of Jesus, and he was not that way. He was kind and loving and accepting. And I had to do a double take of my own attitude, because I don't want to be judgmental, that's not Christ-like at all. I feel like I am doing better on that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty laid back person. And when I look back at the way I used to think as a teenager, it shocks me because I mean, I don't care what people wear. I don't even notice half the time. But like I was so hyper vigilant and I noticed every little thing and I judged every little thing and I was harsh. Like for years after I left, I would still catch myself just saying something really harsh and judgmental of someone else. And like, it's one of those things that when it comes out your mouth, you just think, oh, that sounded terrible.
Right.
And
But I catch myself now thinking, oh, I should not have just said that. Why did I even think that?
yeah,
Where before I felt justified in that thinking.
progress.
Right.
Yes, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that when you have so many visual qualifiers, it's easy for everyone to sit and judge one another.
Right. We actually had a lady with a box of safety pins at the church. Did you have one of those? If you're so lady, she would drag you through the bathroom.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we didn't have a safety pin lady. See, I feel like I dodged a bullet there.
Right? You're so lucky.
I am lucky. So of course I have to talk about the holy magic hair.
Yes.
I can't leave that one alone. That is a very unique to the UPC thing. My video on the holy magic hair has the most dislikes of any video I've made. It's upset people.
It's not funny. It's a little funny though.
Yes. And several people have commented in an attempt to correct me that no, the UPC doesn't teach this. This is not what they believe, You can buy the book. We chatted about this earlier. I looked it up. You can buy the book Power Before the Throne by Ruth Ryder right on the Pentecostal Publishing House website for $10. And the description quote under the book, well, first of all, they don't just sell any old Christian books on there.
Right.
You're not going to go on there and buy Free by Jennifer Brewer.
Right. Even though it says United Pentecostal Church right on the front.
Right on the front. I'm telling you. So they're very selective about the books. Yeah. Her book is there, and the description quote under the book is by none other than Lee Stoneking, UPC royalty. And he said, this book is a must for every woman of God who wishes to make her calling and election sure in his kingdom. Ruth Ryder fearlessly raises her voice regarding God's purpose for women. For the people who will try to tell me, no, UPC doesn't teach this, this isn't a thing. You write in your book about attending a ladies' conference where the speaker was none other than Ruth Ryder.
Yes. And she came to our state UPC sponsored ladies conference. So obviously, the publishing house was there promoting her book. I think it was only a couple years after that book came out, and they were actively selling it. The fact that they're still selling that on their website, I mean, you can't deny that. Whenever I did the cultish episodes, I did a couple podcasts on cultish, and I had mentioned this as well. And I did have a lot of people, respond by saying, oh, the UPC doesn't believe that. That is crazy. You can't denounce that belief if they're promoting it at conferences and their own website and their own publishing house is promoting this book. Like, right. You can't go back and say, oh, well, the UPC doesn't believe that way. Well, clearly they do. Or they believe close enough that they just let that slide, So either way, they're still believing that. They're still promoting this idea that somehow your hair is protecting you and your family from all the evil spirits in the world,
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to read from your book where you wrote about this. It says, around this time, I went to a ladies' retreat, and the speaker, who also happened to have written a book they were selling on the subject, made all of us women take our hair down and have a shout down prayer service, hair flying everywhere, to celebrate the fact that we had power and covering on our heads. 1 Corinthians 11. The speaker told us a story about a minister's wife who trimmed her hair and immediately her husband started having an affair. Her marriage and ministry fell apart. Her hair wasn't protecting her husband any longer simply because the ends of her glory had been cut off, thus causing him to commit adultery. She threatened us with the lives of our children and family members because, again, this is about protection and safety. Their very lives would be in jeopardy if we mistreated our God-given power as women and trimmed our hair. So tell me all about the service where the hair came down for power.
You know, the crazy thing is I've been in more than one of those services. I know, right? Always at a ladies retreat in our state. So I don't know if that's just, I live in Missouri. I don't know if that's just like a Midwest thing. Yeah, so I'm an introvert by nature anyway, so I didn't do this simply because when your hair is through your rear and it's stringy to begin with and you put it up, if you take it down, it looks really bad. And so in my mind, I'm like, I am not doing that. I am not taking my hair down. You all go out to eat after service. That's what you do. So I'm like, I am not doing that. But anyway, I was more of a stand back, watch what's going on kind of thing. And I just remember all of these people, 2,500 to 3,000 people there, taking their hair down, shouting, jumping up and down. If you've ever seen a Pentecostal service, you know exactly those kind of services, but imagine just hair flinging everywhere. And I just remember looking up, and in the corner where I don't know if they have like their video equipment or whatever is up there, the sound equipment maybe, but the hotel employees that we were renting the convention center were all like huddled around this window watching this service. And I was embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, they have no idea, and I bought into the idea. Okay. So here I am. Okay. I believe what she just told me as fact. I mean, she does a great job in that book, breaking it down to where it sounds legitimate. If you don't actually do your own research, like
yes.
It's very believable. But I believed it, but I still remember looking at those people going, oh my gosh, like, how are we ever going to witness these people or, bring them to Christ with them watching us acting like this? And now, looking back, 1 Corinthians 14, where Paul talks about, decently and in order, I'm thinking, this was no way decent or in order. But, the organ's going, the drums are going, people are singing, and people are just shouting, laying out, praying in tongues, just all the chaos that goes on with that, with hair flying.
With the added
power. Right. And that was the whole purpose, because they felt like, and I've heard this said, like I said, more than once, I've been to more than one conference that they actually did that. Yeah. I guess the idea was to show off your glory. I don't know. I don't really understand where they were trying to go with that. Yeah.
I don't understand the need to let it down. Like God knows everything. If your hair is uncut and long, he knows. Would he not honor it? You had to take it down and shake it all around. Like,
that was the idea. It was more of like, let's show the devil, all of our long glory. God is prideful in our glory, basically, is what it was. Prideful in the fact that we have this protection.
And interestingly enough, never ever anywhere in scripture do you ever see anything like that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So more than one service. Duly noted for all the people who want to say, this does not happen. Yes, it does.
And this is not all that long ago either. I realize the early 2000s has been a minute for a few people, but it's in, the last 15 years.
I know. Yeah. So you left the UPC, what led you to start questioning things? You grow up with the UPC doctrine, which has morphed over the years into this 3-step plan of salvation with the big bunch of dress standards. and all this stuff. What led you to think, okay, maybe not?
My father-in-law was a licensed minister in the UPC, and he passed away in 2015. So when he passed away, my husband is the oldest of three kids, but his middle sister at the time called me one day and she just said, I can't do this. I can't live up to the standards. And it was for her, it was, she could not live up to the perfectionism of having to be perfect all of the time, not trimming her hair, not wearing makeup. You know, she worked in a professional environment. Like, she felt she needed to present herself in a professional manner. And it's really hard to do that when you're a woman and you're very limited. I'm not saying it's impossible. You can,
No, you
but
can, but
it is very difficult.
yeah.
And so for her, it was just more of, she just couldn't live it. And so I was very upset with her. But my husband and I, we always kind of question things. Even when we first got married, we got married very young. And at that time, we were still questioning things. So here we are, straight out of our parents' houses, going, do we really believe that women can't wear pants? Like, where is that actually in the Bible? You know, so
Yeah.
we were already kind of questioning things, but it's drilled in your head so much that you have to obey your pastor. You have to be submissive. You have to obey authority, that we were scared to do anything different. And so when she came out and said that she was leaving, I knew that her appearance was going to change. She was going to cut her hair. She was going to be wearing pants. And I knew, because she was going to be doing that, that my youngest sister-in-law would be doing that. And my mother-in-law would probably fall away, you know, at the time. And so all of that, I was sad because I felt like she was going to go to hell, or potentially go to hell. I wasn't really sure.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was miserable. And there were so many times I could remember, like, this makes me tear up just thinking about how ridiculous it was, but I would just cry. I would just cry in the shower all the time because I just felt ugly. I felt like I was embarrassed of my appearance. And I know that sounds very vain to say, but you know, when you can't do anything about it, you can't do anything about it. And I just felt very oppressed all the time. I constantly felt like I was going to hell because I can't live a perfect life. I was always sinning in some way. You know, I would think negatively, or, you know, have a bad thought here or there. And I wasn't giving enough money, you know, something. I was always something that made me think that if the rapture were to happen, I was going to be left behind. And so that's just very oppressive. And I just felt like I couldn't breathe. And so taking all of those feelings, which I thought were just me, I thought I had the problem. I thought everyone else around me was doing well in their walk with God, and I was the one that had the issues. And so with her coming to me and saying that, and then me already having all of these questions and doubts and thoughts, I went to my husband. I'm like, listen, we're going to have to explain this to our kids. Your sister's going to come up. Your mom's going to come up. They're going to see that they're dressed differently. They're fixing the hair differently. You know, they're going to come to us. My kids, I think, were, I don't know, 9 and 12 at the time, somewhere 8 and 12 in the time, somewhere in between there. So they were old enough that they would have noticed. And so we started studying things out in an effort to validate our beliefs. It wasn't because we were wanting to rebel. It wasn't because we were trying to leave because we didn't want to toe the line anymore or be submissive to our pastor. It wasn't anything like that at all. It was simply because we wanted to raise our kids in the church. We wanted to teach them our beliefs that we were taught when we were kids. We wanted to carry on that tradition. But once we started breaking things down, topic by topic, we realized that everything that we were taught it's not biblical.
And of course, like the first subject you search out and you come away going, wow, okay, so this was preached really hard and really with great confidence, and they were wrong. And then you start wondering, well, what else could they be wrong about?
Right.
Yeah.
The first topic that we researched was hair, because of that service, because of that Power Before the Throne book. That was I held on to that. I hated my hair. I hated it so much because I had permed it because that was the only thing I was allowed to do. So my hair was damaged. It was just stringy, falling out. It was so thin. And And it was really getting to the point where it was hard for me to even put it up, because bobby pins wouldn't even stay in the ends because it was just, there was nothing there. And so that was, I thought I was so sure on that doctrine. I was so sure on that theology was correct that I told my husband, I said, we're going to study this out first, because I already am sure about this. I have studied this out, by reading her book, essentially. Honestly, it's sad to say we didn't know how to study. We had no idea. We had just been always taught, I was a Bible quizzer. I've memorized all of these verses, but I didn't know how to research. I didn't know how to study the Bible. And so we had to learn how to do that. And we started with hair because it was supposed to be easy for us. And it turns out that obviously is not exactly how she worded it in her book.
Right. So you started with an easy one that you figured would be,
Right.
Easy to just get this one out of the way and move on. And then you found yourself there a little longer than you thought.
It took us 4 months. We
Wow.
studied hair for 4 months straight. Now, I mean, granted, we were actually doing a Bible study with another couple that we knew. So we were doing it one day a week. But we broke down the entire chapter of 1 Corinthians, chapter 11, verse by verse by verse, word by word, basically in the original Greek, because that's how badly, like, once it started to unravel,
Yes.
I was grasping at straws. I was like, okay, well, surely there's something in here that says this. And once you go back and actually look through all of the Greek meanings of all those words, which you've brought out very well in all of your videos, it's not in there. It's not. And the whole idea that Ruth Reader brought out in her book about the protection from Egypt, the covering over the doorpost, your hair is your covering. So it symbolizes the covering over your doorpost. And that isn't even the same word. If you look it up, it's not, and I don't want to reiterate everything that you've already talked about, because you're spot on, but it was such a feeling of betrayal. And you're just
Because
lost.
you gave up so much. See, this is it. Like, if it was black and white and clear and they spoke it with confidence and you felt like, okay, this is no fun and I hate it, but I can do anything I need to do to please God because I love God and I want to please him. Then when you have come through years of misery and high school and, you've denied all of these things that you could have done, only to find out they didn't have a leg to stand on. And it is a sense of betrayal, isn't it?
Betrayal only like scratches the surface. I think it's just, like you said, you've sacrificed all of these things. And had it been biblical, had it actually been what God wanted, I would hate it, but I would do it.
Yep. Same.
But it's not. And so realizing that, here I am almost 40.
Yeah.
And this sounds so vain of me, but I gave up my teenage years, my 20s.
Yeah.
Why?
If it had been for something, it would have been worth it.
Exactly.
But you find out that no, it was for nothing. It was basically just to keep a pastor happy.
Exactly. And then it makes you wonder, okay, well, did the pastor actually believe that? Does the pastor actually believe into this? Because if they go to theology school of any sort and actually do any sort of research, how can they support that belief?
Yeah. Same with the pants.
Right.
You grow up in a cold climate and you wear skirts and you go to school and the tops of your legs are numb and have that weird frostbitey feeling because you waited for the bus and it's just your normal. And, you see girls go to sliding parties with their skirts over their snow pants and you can't play sports and you go through all this stuff only to get to the end of it and realize they had nothing. One weird Old Testament scripture they pulled out of Deuteronomy about pertaineth to a man, which is only in the King James Version. And when you look into that, I mean, it's so obvious that that's not what it meant. And if you're going to pull that out, you're going to have to pull the other verses before it and after it out as well. And nobody's interested in doing that. Right. And you realize, I don't even know who I would have been as a person had I had the freedom to just live a normal life. but we'll never know now because you
Right.
can't go back and redo that. It's over. But did you have like kind of a mourning period where you looked back and sort of mourned kind of the loss of the life you could have had?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was like grieving a death.
Yeah.
I mean, you go through the exact emotions. You know, you go through the denial, you go through the anger, all of it. The 5 steps of grief, you experience them all, and it's for multiple reasons. It's not just because I've missed out, which is huge because, like you said, like I have no idea what I would be doing with my life. I would not have gotten married so young. I would not have, I would have went to a secular college. I would have, done something differently with my life. I'm not saying that I don't like my life now because that's not what I'm saying at all.
Same,
But
but just wonder.
right, it would have turned out so differently, and I probably wouldn't have struggled with insecurity as much as I did, and still do to this day. I'm very insecure. So that kind of stuff for sure. But then also you go through the grieving of losing family because I left behind my family at the church we went to. Now, granted, my family didn't like disown us or anything. They were pretty good about it. As they took it as well as they could have in the situation.
Yeah.
But we lost friends,
Oh,
friends
yeah.
who vowed to be family to us. I mean, when the church consumes your entire life, like I said, my kids were quizzing when we left. And so that's 2 weekends out of the month right there.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the practices and stuff. So you're with this group of people all the time. And when you leave, I wanted to do it right. I did. I went to everybody personally. I made it very clear that I still wanted to be friends with them. I wanted to continue to have our relationship. And I can't sit here and say that most of them were ignorant to my face because
Yeah.
a lot of them weren't. There were some, but a lot of them weren't. But I did hear about things later behind my back. And now knowing, because when you're there, everyone else is going to hell, and everyone who leaves has that rebellious spirit.
Yeah.
So in the back of my mind, I know that they all think that I'm going to hell. I know that they all think that I am rebellious and I have betrayed their very essence, by even especially speaking out against their church now at this point.
Yeah.
But you grieve that. You grieve the loss of those relationships. They all think of me now as a soul to be saved. So I feel like even if they do talk to me or want to have lunch with me or whatever, which is very far and few between, it's more of a, oh, well, I saw Jennifer today, so I'm gonna try to. We got so many church invites, like special services are coming up, and
You're a mission field.
exactly. You have lost the connection of friendship. You
Yeah.
have lost all of the history. I mean, the last church that we were in, the last UPC church that we were in, we were there for 13 years, or somewhere in between there. Yeah. And so those people had seen my kids being born. They were my kids' families. My extended family all lives out of town. My kids have like my parents here, but everybody else they know lives out of town. So that was their family. That was our whole community, our whole life. And the way that my kids were even treated, I had to grieve that as well, because here I am thinking, okay, all of these friends that my kids, especially my daughter, had made, but my son went through it too, turned on them. And I had to help them go through that and that hurt and that betrayal and that grieving process. And that put a whole nother level on the healing afterwards. So when you leave, it's not like you can just walk away. It's not like you're just switching a church. It's not like things remain the same, because it's impossible for them to remain the same.
Yeah. And in their defense, the way things are set up, it's hard on them too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very hard on them. And it's hard on you. And the way church is set up when you're in such an exclusive little group is the church is your entire universe. You're not allowed to do anything else. You're not really, it's really kind of frowned upon to be friends with anybody else. And so that becomes your world or your bubble, we'll call it. And when your bubble gets burst, you're just standing there. Okay, those people aren't your people anymore, but you don't fit out here either. You're like a man without a country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very lonely feeling. It's a very alone feeling to have when you're just trying to figure out where you fit.
And I think, I've said this before, a lot of times people don't get it. It's a lot easier to stay in so many
Oh,
ways.
yes,
It
big
would have
time.
been
I
so much easier.
totally. I know people who probably believe more like me, but who stay because of their family. They don't want to go through it with their family. They don't want to disappoint their parents. They don't want to go through the shunning. I mean, let's be honest, when most of us leave, they make an example of us. And so everyone sees how that plays out. And nobody in their right mind wants to go through what we've all gone through.
Right.
It
Exactly.
just is too high of a price to pay.
Right. And they have valid reason. I mean,
Yeah.
those are all very valid reasons. And had something about me personally, I hate inauthentic people. Like, I don't want to be that way. I want to be authentic with myself. I want to, show my true colors, whether it be, something silly or stupid that I've done or whatever. I just want to be authentic with myself. And at the point where we had researched everything to where we could not research it anymore, I couldn't continue going there and be authentic. I couldn't dress that way, because let's be real, if you attend those churches, you can dress however you want, but you're not going to be able to be used, and they're still going to look at you as a mission field, because those hardcore leadership positions are going to be thinking you're sinning. And so they're going to
And you're like a mission field within your own church. And so not only that, but you're like a target sort of too. And so every time there's a hoop and shout down service where the tears are squirting everywhere and, I don't know, maybe hair's flying everywhere. I don't know what kind of service you have. I've never been in one of those, but somebody is going to come and get you because the Lord has impressed something on their heart.
every
And they're
time.
going to want to drag you to the front and make a spectacle of you because the Lord can't move on you in your seat. You've got to come up front so everyone can see.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you can do what you want, dress however you want, but brace yourself because you're going to be prayed with until you buckle back under.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk about you, like the judgment that we just discussed, and that they can say that it's not there, but I lived it. You can say that all you want, but I've been through it.
And I mean, that being said, there are a lot of wonderful UPC people.
Yes.
Wonderful UPC people who love Jesus and who have the best of intentions, but it's just a whole doctrine set up to be exclusive and to not allow people any leeway to seek God for themselves and to work out personal convictions. Everything is legislated and it's very legalistic.
Right. The judgmentalism is just built in.
I mean, how can you not? When you have like a laundry list of things that people have to check and people aren't checking it, it's just human nature to make notice of that and think, well, that person's not checking number 3 or number 7. And,
right. So you better pray for them.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously in rebellion.
Like it's easy to observe people and measure them by the list.
Right.
And there's nobody who wouldn't get caught up in that.
Well, right, exactly. I'm not even looking down on them or blaming them for being that way. It's just a part of the system.
And it's human nature to react that way.
Exactly. And there's so many good UPC people. Like I have so many friends that I left that I grieve for them. I grieve for them that they're still there because I know the struggle and it kills me.
Yeah, it bothers me too. This is something we've talked about because we've both been accused of doing what we do because we hate the UPC and we're angry and we're bashing them and stuff. And in reality, it comes from a place of love. I love UPC people. I just really do not agree with their doctrine. I feel like a lot of them are trying so hard to be good enough. And we can't.
We can't. And there's no reason to try, because that's what God sent Jesus for. That's why he died on the cross. And when we try to measure up like that, I feel like we're just telling him that his sacrifice was not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't enough for us. And we feel like we have to do more because as humans, somehow we can put more to that. I don't know. But
yeah,
when you are under that mindset and you're constantly striving to be better, which is, it's so easy to get caught up in, like you said, because you want to make sure that you're pleasing to God. You really do. But I had so much conviction after we left, because I just thought, well, why did Jesus die? Why did he die on the cross if I was able to make my salvation pleasing to him, make myself pleasing? Our righteousness is filthy rags, the Bible says.
absolutely.
And there's nothing that we can do. Is that saying that we should live in sin? Paul said no.
No.
But God doesn't care what you're wearing. He doesn't care if you trim your hair. He does not care if you have makeup on. Why would he? I mean, like, he has bigger things to deal with.
Yeah. All the problems in the world, and he's
right.
Your lip gloss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do cope a lot with sarcasm and laughter. I have to.
Same here.
Right.
And I know it offends people when people hear me. They're just like, oh, your tone wasn't very good about that. And I'm just like, yeah, but I've been like that since birth. I'm just a sarcastic person. It's nothing personal.
Yeah, it's same. And it just is what it is. That's just how I am. But truly my heart is with the people who are still there, because I felt so oppressed and so depressed and just heavy all of the time. The last 4 years since we left, like, I can't even explain how free I feel, how happy I am. While I carry the burden for those who are left in that organization, I know that I'm okay. I don't have to worry about my salvation 24/7. I can go out in whatever I feel like wearing, and I don't have the pressure of someone talking about me if I'm pumping gas in a pair of yoga pants. It's just, that's how God wants you to live. He doesn't want you to be burdened with all of these crazy rules. I mean, look at the Pharisees. So he doesn't want that for you.
That's right. And when you get a revelation of the grace of God and you realize that he did it all, it's all on him. He did it all. The pressure's off, because then you realize, oh my goodness, it's not on me. Thank goodness. Because I know what a train wreck I am as a person, just in general. And so I know I can't do this.
Right.
And the pressure's off and your stomach unclenches and you breathe a sigh of relief. And you just start living your life. Now, do you live your life like a crazy person that's just free to sin and do whatever you want? Well, of course not. You're in love with Jesus,
Right.
Like you said, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? No, of course not. We want to live lives pleasing to him. But what we do out of love, and not because we have to be saved. Because Jesus paid it all.
Right.
I bring nothing. I love that quote. It's a Jonathan Edwards quote. It's the, you bring nothing to your salvation, but the sin that made it necessary. That's right. That's all I bring. But, so what led you to consider blogging and writing your book, other than, of course, the wealth and fame of it all?
Oh, clearly the wealth and the fame is and that's laughable too, because let's be real, I'm not making any money off of this. I tried to price it as low as possible. And actually, my book is free right now on Amazon. Yes. If you get the Kindle version until the end of March, it is absolutely free. Just because, with this crazy social distancing thing going on, I know people are reading right now, and I do want people to read it, but it's definitely not about the money. No. What led me to it to begin with was an outlet for me. I was going through therapy because, let's be real, being brought up in that kind of church can lead to a lot of scars.
Yes.
And blogging was first my way of just release. I needed an outlet. I would be on social media and see all of these people who I used to be connected with, like all of their posts, and I wanted just so badly to go off on them, which sounds terrible. But I knew that was not the correct, healthy way to handle it. So I started blogging for me, and it was so therapeutic. And but lo and behold, like I started blogging and people started following it and people started reading it and sharing it. And I was like, oh, well, then I realized this could actually help other people than just me.
Yeah.
So that was the whole purpose of the book. It's a quick, easy read. It's not like it's this huge philosophical production, because that is just not me. It's word vomit, honestly. Like it's just my story. But I did want to share because there are so many people left there. There's hundreds of thousands of people in the United Pentecostal Church, and even more in religions like it. And the women especially have such a feeling of oppression. And we've already talked about how it's just a heavy burden to carry all of the time, because not only are you trying to live up to these standards for God to be pleased with you, but you're also trying to live up to these standards to protect your family. I didn't want my husband to cheat on me. I didn't want my kids to die in some crazy bus accident on their way to school. All these things that were said to happen to people who leave. So working through all of that made me realize that I am very blessed that I left when I did. And I almost feel like this is my ministry at this point, to help other people who are leaving or have left, because because of my blog, because of my book, and even like the episodes I did on cultish, like so many people have reached out to me, and I don't take that lightly. I am very encouraged that people feel like they can share it with me. And I know that you've had that as well. But it's just a burden that I carry. It's a new burden that I carry. But for all of these people who are still there, it's like a hamster wheel trying to do everything right. And they're constantly living this day after day after day after day after day. And they honestly feel like they're in the right, and they feel like this is needed, and it's exhausting. And I can just look at them and just see the exhaustion on them, because it's a never ending cycle of never being good enough. And so I just pray that somehow I can help one person. Like if I just help one person, it'll be worth it.
Oh, and I think you already have. Like, I think that this is also really good for people who are thinking of leaving, but they're almost afraid to bring themselves to ask those questions because there's so much fear woven into their teachings.
Right.
And then the people who leave, who, like I was saying, you're like a man without a country, and you're just like, okay, what now? What do I do? And so plugging into some of the Facebook groups for support, and reading books like this and your blog, and there's other people with channels and stuff. I think it's a big encouragement. Like when I did it, there was nothing that I knew of, and I did it alone, and it was very hard. And so I would love to keep anybody from having to go through that. So, typically my advice to UPCers is, look, if you're happy where you're at, fine. I'm not trying to convert you.
Right.
But, if you have questions and you have doubts, look into it.
Right. And I know somebody had mentioned that they wish that I had went into a little more of the doctrine in my book, and the things that we had found when we left. But that's not the point. I don't want to persuade people to leave. That's not the purpose or the mission. But I do want to encourage people to look into that for themselves. Any questions that they have, write them out, and, with purpose, research each and every one as much as you possibly can on your own, without having the material of the UPC or me or anyone.
Yeah.
Like, you dig into God's word and God will lead you. And I guess that's my biggest thing. I don't want people to take my word for it. I don't want to become a Ruth Reader in how I was with her book. I read her book. I didn't investigate anymore. I just took her word for granted that she had researched it. And I don't want anyone ever to do that with anything that I have said or written. I want them to maybe use that as a platform or a starting point, but work out your own soul salvation. God gave us his spirit and put that inside of us for a reason. He put the Holy Spirit inside of us. And, I feel like all those years of me crying in the shower, all the oppression that I felt, was actually the Holy Spirit working on me and just trying to show me that something was wrong. And I took that as something was wrong with me personally.
Yes.
I wasn't, until after we left, I realized that was God trying to tell me that I needed to actually look into things and research things for myself. But take the doubts and the questions that you have, but take that maybe as God saying, maybe you should look into this a little bit more and what you're investing your life in, because you're investing your entire life into something and you want it to be right.
And if it's true, it'll stand up to the questions.
Exactly.
And if it's not, do you really want to spend a lot of time on something that's not? I guess I look at it that way. And that was the whole point of my channel too. And that was why I chose the name Responsible Faith. Take responsibility for your own faith. Don't take my word for it. Don't take your parents' word for it, your pastor's word, your husband's word, nobody's word. Figure it out for yourself, because when you figure it out for yourself, you're standing on solid ground at that point. No one is going to shake you one way or another. You know where you stand.
Exactly.
And, yeah. So I guess my last question would be, well, are you bitter? You leave the UPC because you're bitter.
Right. That is the most common theme as far as criticism goes. Well, they're just bitter. I guess you could say, in some ways I am, because that organization stole years from my life. But am I speaking out of bitterness? No. And do I feel like I have a bitter spirit or I'm rebellious? No. I actually don't even feel like I have a reprobate mind, shockingly enough. I know. I am passionate, is what I am.
At least have a Jezebel spirit.
Clearly. I mean, I have eyeliner on, so that's
There you go.
But I am passionate about it, because not against God. I'm not bitter against any of the people who are there. Like, I love them deeply, and I still have family members that are there, friends that are there.
Yeah.
I'm not bitter. I want to share my experience, because there are so many other people stuck in the same rut. And I guess maybe that might come out as bitter to those who are very involved and hardcore into the organization, maybe, but it's just an organization. It's man-made organization. It is not God. It is not the one and only sanctified church, the bride of Christ. It's not. The United Pentecostal Church organization is just that, an organization.
Yeah, and it's an organization that has changed over the years. That would do a lot of people good to go and take a look. What did they believe 50 years ago? Was a lot of this foolishness on the table 50 years ago? They didn't exist 75 years ago.
Well, right, that should
some of these founding fathers that they like to quote, did they believe this stuff? No, a lot of them didn't. Right. So it would do some of them well to just take a little stroll down their history,
but not use UPC published material.
Yeah.
You need, because they've changed things.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Well, my advice would be buy Jennifer's book, or go read it for free until the end of the month while you're sitting home on quarantine in your pajamas eating snacks all day long.
Exactly. Might as well. What else do you have to do?
That's right.
Let that be your starting point. Don't just
right.
My word for it.
Yes, this is not the Bible. This is Jennifer's book. And I think it's a matter of getting out of the rut of just being spoon-fed things, which is kind of almost how things are set up. Mm-hmm. And learn how to study, look things up for yourself, and take responsibility for your own faith. So that's probably a good ending point. And thank you so much for being willing to come on. And I appreciate this book, Jennifer, and I really appreciate how transparent you were. It's easy for people to sit back and judge and make comments and snide little remarks and stuff. But whether somebody disagrees with your doctrinal viewpoints or not, there is a measure of courage that it takes to just put yourself out there. And you and I both know from dealing with people aren't always nice. And so I just want to thank you for being so transparent. And I know the reason you did it was because you knew that there were going to be people who are going to be touched by aspects of your story that maybe you'd have rather just kept to yourself. And so I really appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate the authenticity in that. And so anyway, I just want to thank you and would like to wish everyone a happy whatever day I decide to post this video. And I hope everyone has a great day.